book with Ken Booth. And this is fundamentally the idea of the empathy I was talking about. So for two individuals at the highest levels of diplomacy to build trust, they have to have that empathy for each other's security concerns. When Reagan and Gorbachev first met one another in November 1985 in Geneva, 31 years ago, they were primed for empathy for a series of reasons on both sides that had led them into that space. When Nikita Khrushchev and John F. Kennedy met in Vienna in June 1961, they were not primed for empathy and the summit was a disaster. So actors have to be primed for empathy. When Vajpayee and Sharif met in Lahore in February 1999, I argue that they were primed for empathy. Vajpayee's empathy, for example, shown by the fact that he visited the Minar. During that visit, he visited the Minar, which was a major, coming back to what Katerina was saying, which was a major signal that India accepted Pakistan's right to exist. By going to the Minar, he was making that move, signaling to Pakistan that, now of course it wasn't enough to persuade Musharraf and the generals, but it was a really important symbolic trust-building step. So in order to, for this argument, you have to have an intuition that the other party is trustworthy. So coming back to my 3 dimensions of trustworthiness, and you test that intuition out, got to stop soon, you test that intuition out through face-to-face interaction, and we argue that face-to-face, in our wider project, we argue that face-to-face interaction is critical to the potentialities for building trust. And what you're trying to gauge is benevolent intent, integrity, and capacity. And I argue that it's the importance of the development of an emotional bond, and the idea of emotional bonding plays a crucial role in my argument, and I can talk about that more. And ultimately what that does is it puts you into a different mental place. So coming back to this idea of trust as a mental state, what happens is, I used to call this the leap of trust, but I think it's problematic, and so I'm dropping it now in my book. But you might find some writings from it where you see me talking about the leap of trust. But fundamentally, there's this willingness to suspend risk calculation because of your belief in the other's trustworthiness. Oh, that wasn't right. And what I argue is that actually, if we get this relationship of trust between 2 leaders, then signals will be interpreted correctly because the sender and the receiver will share this bond of trust. And that's why I think you can signal your type and why Mearsheimer's wrong. But it's at the interpersonal level, it's not at the state-to-state level. Okay, very quickly. So the importance of security dilemma sensibility, we need to spend a lot more time doing that. In our workshop on Thursday morning, we'll be getting the participants to do exactly this, putting themselves in the shoes of, and trying to play out India-Pakistan role plays with some of you playing Pakistan and so on. I've done this before I've done this before 2 or 3 times before working with WisComp, and it's really interesting to do this kind of alter casting and security dilemma sensibility, and I think some people in the room have been part of some of that. The importance of interpersonal interaction, this I think is the really big theoretical claim here, as against individualist and structuralist approaches, and part of a wider project that we're taking on at Birmingham. Face-to-face, the elusive role of personal chemistry. Why did it work with Reagan and Gorbachev, but not with Khrushchev and Kennedy? And successful signals of reassurance, the key to states communicating their type, depend upon a relationship of trust between the sender and the receiver of the signal. Thank you very much. And then the problem of how to shield bonding trust from domestic spoilers and future uncertainty, what happens if new leaders come along. So we can pick more of that up in Q&A if you want and later. Thank you. Okay. Right. Thank you very much.